so let's just move right along. And this is the second installment of Close Encounters with Three Kinds. And this is the story behind my second encounter with a militia group here in Indiana. And all three of these have been in Indiana. The second group I contacted through the internet, and unlike the first group, I really didn't receive any kind of calls forever, any kind of messages or nothing. The second group contacted me almost immediately. So I was really surprised. It was less than a week, and I got a message back. Now, real quick backstory. There was a documentary on the History Channel, I believe, called Militia's Rising or something to that nature. And what it was Discovery Channel or History Channel, I don't remember. But anyway, they followed like a handful of militias around and did like a little documentary on them. One of the militias was an Indiana State militia. And all I got to say is, whew, I was embarrassed to be a Hoosier when I saw that. It was horrible. It was horrible. So anyway, that's a little backstory. Because the group that I got in contact with wasn't that particular militia, but so anyway, the second group that I got in contact with contacted me like almost immediately and said, hey, listen, we got we'll be getting together, and you know, we'd be glad to have you come along. So I said, cool. So we talked a couple times on the internet, and he said, you know, that he could come through town, pick me up, and we would go off to where it was up in the upper northern part of Indiana, up by Fort Wayne. So anyway, we met at a local McDonald's. It was him, his wife, and his kids all picked me up, and we drove up to Fort Wayne and spent the night. I was going to spend the night there that night, and then the next day they were going to have their meeting and their little gathering or whatever. So, you know, I committed to just randomly going with a stranger, you know, up to the top of Indiana without ever meeting them or ever really knowing them or anything. But what's the worst that could happen? So anyway, so we drive up to Fort Wayne area, and we go to this house. It was in the middle of a neighborhood. It wasn't even in the rural, you know, it was in Fort Wayne in a community. So there was a small piece of woods in the guy's backyard, so I figured that's probably where they would do their training. But anyway, before we get to that, so we got there that night and stayed up most of the night talking, and they started discussing all of the weapons that they have. And one guy's like, well, I just ordered, you know, this weapon here and da-da-da-da-da, and they were naming off all these weapons. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, what did I just, you know, get myself into? These guys are talking about tons of weapons. I mean, they were tons of different kinds of weapons. And I got a little nervous. I might have to fight my way out of here. So they were sitting around discussing all these firearms that they had and had stashed away, and you know, had in their vehicles for tomorrow, and all this kind of stuff. And I started getting a little nervous, to be totally honest. And then all of a sudden, one of the guys go, "Hey, you wanna see the order form that I just got back from, you know, the last weapon that I ordered?" I'm like, "Sure." So he brings out a paper from, I think it was eBay. I think it was off of eBay, and they were talking about airsoft guns, airsoft. And then I went from thinking these guys were psycho, heavy militia, you know, crazies, to just plain old retards. So I relaxed after that because I figured, okay, these guys really aren't a militia. They're an airsoft group. So we talked for the rest of the night, and I, you know, less and less enthusiastic about their whole group. So we get up the next morning, and they're all dressing in camo, you know, getting on all their uniforms and all their airsoft rifles and all this kind of stuff. And then they go out in the front yard and form up, get a formation out in the front yard. And they start, and I looked at them and I'm like, you know, I'm not really feeling well, guys. I'm gonna set this out. So I sat on the porch, and I was already like, no. So, you know, they got out in the front yard, traffic going by and everything, and did their little militia stuff with their formations and roll calls, and, you know, acting like they were like some kind of real army or something. And they actually had a few people stop and complain about what they were doing. And I mean, you know, you got, I don't know, there was probably 10 or 12 people there. So you got 10 or 12 people dressed in camo in the middle of town, in somebody's front yard, doing, you know, with airsoft rifles on their backs, and, you know, doing all this army stuff. Yeah, that might cause a little bit of a problem. I don't know why they didn't go in the backyard, into the woods. Well, actually, I do. I think they were just looking for attention, personally. But anyway, I called my wife and I said, listen, I said, these guys are idiots. I said, you know, can you come and get me, because I am not going to be able to stay out here all day without saying something to these retards. So she actually drove all the way up to Fort Wayne and picked me up, just because I wasn't gonna, I couldn't deal with them. But the thing is, two things about it, which was interesting. Now, the story I told you before about that militia group being on TV. The reason I told that story is because that militia group, the militia group that I'm talking about right now, was formed by the big, huge, large, out of shape, whatever, person that had created the militia that was on that TV show. So if you guys have seen that TV show, that really huge guy that didn't look like he knew his ass from a hole in the ground, who calls himself Colonel, who apparently was in the Army. He says he was in the Army, supposedly was a sergeant in the Army. I don't know. I don't really care. But got out and promoted himself to colonel and started well, what he calls a militia group, what I call an airsoft group. But anyway, that's how that ties in. So yeah, when he told me that guy started this militia, I almost just busted out laughing right there. It would have been
Wifey Pooh to come rescue you from the big bad militias.
Yeah, I had to have Wifey Pooh come rescue me. Yes.
Poor baby was scared. He was scared he was gonna hurt the big bad militias.
Oh my God, that is horrible. And the second interesting thing was
stuff you get us into.
Yeah, the second thing that was interesting is the first story I told about trying to get a group together myself. You know, I sometimes came across some weird people who wanted to be in militias. So anyway, through talking with this second group, I found out that one of the guys that came to one of my meetings was part of their militia for a while. And yeah, he was just crazy. Guy had some problems, which is why I passed on having him join me. And apparently he got into a little trouble with these guys because they booted him out. So It was interesting, I have to say. It was interesting. But, there was clearly nobody I was going to find there that was serious about survival and serious about prepping. They were more interested in airsofting and pretending to be in the military. So that was my second encounter with the 3 failures that I had with encounters with militia groups. So next episode, I will talk to you about the third and final encounter with the craziness.